Hello. Hey everybody, how you doing? Miss me? How are you? Good to see you. So we are talking about, we got a little short video, it's maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about the Cold War. Let me tell you where we are. In AP, we are pretty much done with all of the AP stuff as far as the sections. So what I'm going to do this week, and it's going to be easy, we're going to walk through the Cold War, and we're going to talk about non-government organizations. We're going to talk about globalization. So this whole week is sort of an easy week to just get through here. There won't be many assignments. You'll just have to read something and then just let me know that you read it. So we won't have many assignments, but there will be a test on this eventually. But anyway, we're going to be talking about the Cold War, and so we're looking at satellite of the globe, and I want you to see some of the deals that happened. Like this is Fidel Castro, and you remember in the 1950s, he came into Cuba, took it over. America helped him, but then he became communist, and Cuba's been in trouble ever since. So during the Cold War, these things happened. The United Nations was chartered in 1945. You remember it was part of the League of Nations, but now here it is. And we talked about decolonization. We've talked about that, how Britain gave up its colonies, how France gave up its colonies, how America gave up the Philippines. We still have Guam and American Samoa. So then we'll talk a little bit about capitalism and communism, which is what the whole thing is about. That's the whole point of the Cold War: capitalism versus communism. And of course, Cuba, which is right on our border, is communist. And then the European community, which kind of fell into a settled down thing. And then the West versus East in both Europe and then in Korea because of the Korean War, and then Vietnam. And then we'll talk about nuclear stuff. So this will be a lot of fun. I do want you to know that I was alive for a lot of this stuff. The Cold War began in the 40s. I was born in the 50s. So Mr. Daniels and I have actually gotten into discussions where his book will say one thing, and I remember personally something else. So it's nice when you're a little older, you can actually teach history from memory. I was in high school, elementary school and high school during the Vietnam War, so I can remember it. In fact, I was signed up for the draft in 1971. I was 18 years old, 1970, and I signed up, and I was eligible to be drafted into the Vietnam War, but they did a lottery, and my number was in the 300s, and the next year they stopped it. So anyway, here's the Cold War. We've got the America over here and the East over here, and there are two words you got to know, and they are NATO and Warsaw. Yeah, don't make fun of my writing. The Warsaw Pact and NATO. NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was the countries of Europe and America that said we will protect them. Warsaw is a town in Poland. Russia and Poland and the USSR, that is, and all of those people had a pact where they got together and said, we will fight. And so they started taking over the Eastern European nations after World War II. By the way, you need to read, I think it's unit, let me look at it. It is unit in AMSCO 8.1. You'll need to read that, and 8.2. You want to look at that because that tells where this whole Cold War thing. I'm not going to give any writing assignments, but you will have a test on it, and we'll even have some quizzes on a Zoom one day this week. So anyway, so you see the red over there, and if you look, there's Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and then you've got the Western, that's NATO here. You notice they're all in the North Atlantic, and even though Turkey was a part of it, just because they were abused by Russia. So this is the Cold War issue. And then out of this came something called proxy wars. Can anybody guess what a proxy war is? Yes, you were totally right. A proxy war is where a war is fought with underlying powers behind it. For example, we have capitalism versus communism. We have Russia versus the United States, China versus the United States, but it turned into the Vietnamese War, which is China versus France. France didn't do a good job in the war. And then China versus the United States. We didn't do a good job either. I don't care what people say. It's the only war that we lost. Well, we lost the War of 1812, but we won it at the negotiating table, thanks to Benjamin Franklin. So, a proxy war. There were two of these, if you can think of, that were fought in this area. What are they? Yes, you're right. The Vietnamese War, I just named that. What's the other one? The Korean War, which ended in 1954. The Vietnam War started in the 1960s, but it went a lot longer, and it ended in the 70s. So we have two nations that are divided. We have North Korea and South Korea, and North Vietnam, South Vietnam. And what's really interesting about that is that both of these, and that's kind of interesting, both of these are peninsulas. And here we are, if you'll look. Here is South Korea and North Korea, and you can see it's still divided. North Korea and South Korea. We've talked about that. We showed the lights at night, how bad it is. So here in Asia is that. Well, let's go down here, and here's Vietnam. You can see it right here. It's this long, and y'all tell me if that's pink, this strip here. It was divided right here by denying it was North Vietnam and South. South was capitalistic. North was communistic. Same thing over here with Seoul, North Korea. North was communist. South was capitalistic. It's still that way today. In fact, there's the 38th parallel where they set the demilitarized zone. Now, Vietnam today, by the way, is still a communist nation, but its economy is capitalistic. Isn't that interesting? China did. I know you're excited about this. Some of you even actually started listening. China's the same way. China is a communist nation, but they have a capitalistic economy. It's because they almost died because of communism was killing everybody. They had millions and millions of deaths because they came up with really bad plans. So, now, briefly, we will see that these nations decided to become independent, and we'll talk about those later as we get to these. And this is a map of decolonization where all these countries, and you see all the colors, were Britain, France, Italy, all of those, and then now all of these are independent. So at one time, Britain owned them, France, Netherlands, all of those, and they've all earned their independence, pretty much so. There is still a little place right down here, the Falkland Islands. It's, where is it? I don't have it on this map. Falkland Islands are in South America, and they're still owned by Britain. Otherwise, and Canada, by the way, still is too. Here was a guy named Che Guevara who was he started out looking like he was going to be a good guy, but he ended up killing a lot of people. He was a communist, murdered a lot of people. Che Guevara, by the way, people on the left, the liberals love him because they say he upset the status quo. But just like Castro, he did, and he was not in Cuba, he was in other areas. But Che Guevara ended up with a lot of deaths, and as it turned out, what he did didn't help anybody because what he put was not good. Okay, let me see. I think I'm done. Let me look and see. China. Yeah, we'll talk about this for just a minute. In the 1970s, there was an Arab-Israeli conflict. There was a war embargo. And, of course, Israel was right in the middle of it, 1948. We've talked about Israel becoming a nation. There's the West Bank, and there's the Sinai, which, by the way, Egypt, Israel has now taken over much of that. And so they control all of this area now, except for Gaza Strip. They've given that back to the Palestinians and people like that. Excuse me, I got some computer stuff to do. Okay, so here's Saudi Arabia, there's Mecca, and there's Iran, and they've got problems. So we'll talk more about them later. But what I want you to know is that there was an East-West, Russia, USSR fight. In 1989 in Nina, Russia failed because of economic problems. It's kind of funny. We're out here trying to buy toilet paper. That was an ongoing way of life. People would spend a day off work to go get in line to get some toilet paper. They just didn't have anything. Everything was so poorly. There was no supply line because nobody had any motive to make anything. And so Russia, and we'll get into a little more detail later, basically fell apart, USSR did, divided into separate countries like Georgia and Uzbekistan and parts of Poland, Crimea, Ukraine, and then Russia, of course. And so now we have just Russia, although Putin is trying to go back and do the same thing. So anyway, we're going to stop here, but we'll pick up more as we talk, and we'll be Zooming, and you will have a test, and it'll be a Zoom test. Get ready for that. Also, we are working on AP lockdown browsers where you cannot get out of your browser. Of course, if you had another computer or a friend with you, I don't know what you would do. But if we did a lockdown browser on a Zoom, it'd be hard for you to fix. I'm sure you'll figure out something. Anyway, good to see you. Talk to you later. We'll be Zooming this way. See you later. Bye.